The termination meeting was supposed to last 5 minutes. Instead, I watched CEO Richard Thompson's face drain of color as I slid a single manila folder across his mahogany desk. His nephew Tyler sat smugly beside him, still glowing from his morning promotion to vice president. "Your old methods are obsolete, Alita. You're no longer needed here," Tyler had declared just minutes earlier. But as Richard opened that folder, Tyler's confident smirk began to falter. 5 years of mentoring had taught me many things about Tyler Thompson, and I had documented every single one. 5 years ago, I thought I was the luckiest woman in corporate America. At 30 years old, I had worked my way up to senior marketing director at Thompson Industries, one of the largest manufacturing companies in the Midwest. Our headquarters in Detroit employed over 15,000 people, and I had earned my reputation the hard way, through late nights, innovative campaigns, and a track record that spoke for itself. That Tuesday morning in September, Richard Thompson himself walked into my corner office on the 23rd floor. Richard was old-school corporate royalty, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and carrying the weight of a company his grandfather had built from nothing in 1947. When the CEO of a Fortune 500 company personally visits your office, you know something significant is about to happen. "Alita, I have a special request," he said, settling into the leather chair across from my desk. My nephew Tyler just graduated from Northwestern with his MBA. Top 10% of his class, Dean's List, the whole 9 yards. "I'd like you to take him under your wing." I felt a surge of pride. Being asked to mentor the CEO's nephew was more than a professional opportunity. It was a vote of confidence in my leadership abilities. "I'd be honored, Mr. Thompson. What role are you considering for him?" "I want him to learn from the best, and that's you. Start him in marketing analytics, but I'm thinking long-term. Vice President track, maybe 5 years down the road. Has got the education, but he needs real-world experience. Your kind of experience." That afternoon, I met Tyler Thompson for the first time. He was 26, tall and lean with perfectly styled brown hair and the kind of confident smile that came naturally to someone who had never known struggle. He wore a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, but there was something genuinely eager in his hazel eyes that immediately put me at ease. "Miss Rodriguez, I can't tell you how excited I am to work with you," he said, extending a firm handshake. "I've read about your campaigns for the automotive sector. The Ford partnership alone increased market share by 18%. That's the kind of strategic thinking I want to learn." I was impressed. He had done his homework. "Please, call me Alita. And I'm looking forward to working with you too. Your uncle speaks very highly of your potential." Those first 6 months were everything I had hoped for in a mentoring relationship. Tyler arrived early, stayed late, and absorbed information like a sponge. I taught him how to read market analytics reports, how to identify emerging trends in consumer behavior, and most importantly, how to build genuine relationships with clients. He shadowed me during important meetings, took detailed notes, and asked thoughtful questions that showed he was really listening. The key to successful marketing isn't just understanding data, I explained during one of our weekly strategy sessions. It's understanding people. Numbers tell you what happened, but relationships tell you what's going to happen. Tyler nodded earnestly, scribbling notes in his leather-bound notebook. "That makes perfect sense. It's like you're not just selling a product, you're building trust." "Exactly. And trust takes time." Our clients have been with Thompson Industries for decades because they know we deliver on our promises. That reputation is worth more than any single campaign. He seemed to genuinely appreciate the wisdom I was sharing. During our monthly progress reviews with Richard, Tyler was always quick to credit my guidance for his growing understanding of the business. "Alita's teaching me things they never covered in business school," he would say. "Real-world applications that make all the difference." I began to feel genuinely proud of his development. Watching him grow from an eager graduate into a capable marketing professional gave me the same satisfaction I imagined teachers felt watching their students succeed. I even started thinking about my own legacy at Thompson Industries, how mentoring the next generation might be my greatest contribution to the company. By month 6, Tyler was leading smaller client presentations with my oversight. His natural charisma served him well in these settings. Clients responded positively to his enthusiasm and fresh perspective, while I provided the strategic depth and industry experience that sealed deals. It felt like the perfect partnership, but during a presentation to Meridian Automotive, one of our most important clients, something felt off. Tyler was scheduled to present our quarterly performance review, a routine meeting I had attended dozens of times. However, when I arrived at the Meridian offices, the receptionist seemed confused. "Oh, Miss Rodriguez, I wasn't expecting you today." "Mr. Tyler Thompson said this was a solo presentation to discuss strategic realignment." My stomach dropped. Tyler was already in the conference room, looking perfectly at ease as he chatted with Meridian's purchasing director, Janet Walsh. When he saw me, his expression flickered for just a moment, before returning to its usual confident smile. "Alita, I was just telling Janet about some innovative approaches we've been discussing. I thought it would be good to get her initial feedback before we formalize anything." Janet looked between us with obvious confusion. Tyler was just explaining how the marketing department is shifting toward more modern, data-driven strategies. He mentioned that some of the older approaches might be holding back progress. I felt my cheeks flush. "Older approaches?" "Well," Tyler said smoothly, "I just meant that your traditional relationship-based model worked great in the past, but maybe we should consider more modern techniques. Digital integration, social media engagement, that sort of thing." The room fell silent. I had been developing digital strategies for 3 years, long before Tyler arrived. But somehow, in the span of 30 minutes, he had positioned himself as the forward-thinking strategist while painting me as resistant to change. "Of course," I managed, forcing a professional smile. "Tyler's learning about all aspects of our current initiatives." But as we left the meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't the eager student I had been mentoring. This was someone playing a much more sophisticated game than I had realized. The Meridian incident bothered me for days, but I convinced myself it was a misunderstanding. Tyler was ambitious. That was good. Maybe his enthusiasm had just gotten ahead of his judgment. During our next one-on-one meeting, I decided to address it directly. "Tyler, about the Meridian presentation. In the future, it's important that we coordinate our client communications." Janet seemed confused about the messaging. He leaned back in his chair, that easy smile never wavering. "Absolutely, Alita. I was just trying to build rapport, show initiative. I probably should have given you more details beforehand." His explanation was reasonable, delivered with just the right amount of contrition. But something in his tone, too smooth, too practiced, made me wonder if this was really his first time talking his way out of trouble. "Building rapport is important," I agreed. "But we need to make sure our messaging is consistent. Our clients trust us because we speak with one voice." "Of course. I'm still learning the ropes." "Won't happen again." But it did happen again. And again. Over the following months, I began to notice a pattern. Tyler would schedule meetings with clients, vendors, and even other departments without informing me. When questioned, he always had plausible explanations. He was exploring synergies, gathering preliminary information, or building relationships. The more troubling development was how he began positioning himself in team meetings. During our weekly department reviews, Tyler started offering subtle critiques of established protocols. "Alita's approaches have been incredibly successful," he would say with that diplomatic smile. "But I wonder if we might consider supplementing them with some more contemporary methods." The younger demographic responds differently to marketing now. The first few times, I tried to engage constructively. "What specific contemporary methods are you thinking about?" "Well, influencer partnerships, for one. Real-time social media engagement. Micro-targeting through data analytics. The kind of agile strategies that can pivot quickly based on market response." These weren't new concepts to me. I had been incorporating digital strategies into our campaigns for years. But Tyler had a gift for making established practices sound outdated while presenting basic marketing trends as revolutionary insights. Jessica Martinez, my assistant for the past 3 years, started giving me concerned looks during these meetings. Jessica was sharp, loyal, and had an instinct for office politics that I sometimes envied. After one particularly frustrating team session, she followed me back to my office. Alita, can I speak freely? Always. Something's not right with Tyler. The way he talks about your strategies, it's like he's setting up to replace them instead of learn from them. I wanted to dismiss her concerns, but Jessica's observations usually proved accurate. Has young, ambitious, maybe has just trying to prove himself. Maybe. But ambitious people usually try to learn from successful mentors, not undermine them. Her words stuck with me. Over the next several weeks, I started paying closer attention to Tyler's behavior. What I discovered was deeply unsettling. Tyler had been systematically building relationships throughout the company, but not in the way I had taught him. Instead of positioning himself as my protege, he was establishing himself as an independent operator. During lunch meetings with executives from other departments, he would present ideas that sounded suspiciously similar to strategies we had discussed in private. Marcus Williams, our director of business development, inadvertently confirmed my suspicions during a casual conversation by the elevators. That nephew of Richard's is really impressive, Marcus said. Smart kid. Has got some interesting ideas about modernizing the client acquisition process. Oh? What kind of ideas? Data-driven targeting? Relationship mapping? Demographic analysis? Sophisticated stuff. He said he's been developing these approaches independently, drawing on his MBA training. I felt my stomach clench. Those were exactly the methodologies I had spent months teaching Tyler, refined through years of practical application. But he was presenting them as his own innovations, developed through academic study rather than mentorship. Did he mention where he learned these techniques? Marcus shrugged. He just said traditional marketing was too slow for today's marketplace. That young talent needs to drive innovation. Makes sense to me. That evening, I stayed late to review Tyler's access logs on our shared computer system. As his supervisor, I had given him temporary credentials to access client files and campaign data for training purposes. What I found made my blood run cold. Tyler had been systematically downloading client profiles, strategic plans, and competitive analyses. Not just reviewing them for learning purposes, but copying entire files to external drives. When I cross-referenced the download dates with his meeting schedule, a clear pattern emerged. Every client meeting, every external presentation, every conversation with other departments had been preceded by him accessing confidential information that he was then presenting as his own research. The scope of his data collection was staggering. In 18 months, he had accessed virtually every major client file, downloaded our complete competitive analysis database, and copied strategic plans for campaigns that wouldn't launch for another 6 months. I sat in my darkened office until nearly midnight, staring at the evidence on my computer screen. This wasn't ambitious inexperience or youthful enthusiasm. This was calculated, systematic appropriation of my work and the company's intellectual property. But when I tried to imagine confronting Richard Thompson with accusations against his nephew, I realized how impossible my situation had become. Tyler's behavior was technically within the bounds of his access privileges. His networking and idea sharing could be characterized as initiative and collaboration. Without clear evidence of malicious intent, my concerns would sound like paranoia or jealousy. Worse, Tyler had spent months positioning himself as the innovative thinker while subtly characterizing my approaches as outdated. If I accused him of stealing my ideas, it might look like I was trying to claim credit for his innovations. The next morning, Tyler arrived at work with his usual confident energy, greeting me with that warm smile that had once seemed so genuine. Good morning, Alita. Ready for another productive day. I managed a professional response, but everything had changed. The eager student I had been so proud to mentor was gone, replaced by someone playing a game I was only beginning to understand. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. 2 days after discovering Tyler's data downloads, I found him in my office after lunch, sitting at my computer with the kind of casual comfort that suggested this wasn't his first unauthorized visit. Tyler, what are you doing? He didn't even look startled. Oh, hey Alita. I needed to pull the Morrison Industries file for my 3 o'clock meeting. You said I could use your login when you gave me the credentials for the training modules. That was true. I had shared my temporary access codes months ago for specific educational purposes. But using them to access my computer without permission crossed every professional boundary. That was for supervised training sessions, Tyler. You can't just use my computer whenever you need something. For the first time since I had known him, Tyler's diplomatic facade cracked. His smile remained, but there was something cold in his eyes that I had never seen before. Alita, you gave me those passwords to help with projects. I'm just being efficient. Richard expects me to be proactive and resourceful. The casual invocation of his uncle's authority sent a chill through me. This wasn't a request or an explanation. It was a subtle threat. Efficiency doesn't include accessing my personal workspace without permission. From now on, if you need files, please ask me directly. Of course, he said, standing up with that same practiced smile. No problem at all. I'll be more careful about boundaries. But his tone suggested that he viewed my concern as petty rather than legitimate. As he walked out of my office, I realized that Tyler no longer saw me as his mentor or supervisor. Somehow, in the span of 2 years, our relationship had shifted into something much more dangerous. The 3rd year of Tyler's employment marked a turning point in his behavior. Emboldened by his growing network within the company, he began operating with increasing boldness. Rather than attending the client meetings I arranged for his continued education, he started scheduling his own appointments, often with the same clients, but presenting different proposals. I discovered this when Patricia Hawkins from Consolidated Manufacturing called to clarify conflicting recommendations she had received from Thompson Industries. Alita, I'm a bit confused. Last week you presented a comprehensive market expansion strategy focused on regional partnerships. But yesterday, Tyler Thompson suggested a completely different approach involving digital transformation and vendor restructuring. Are these competing proposals? My hands trembled as I gripped the phone. Patricia, I need to apologize for the confusion. Let me review our internal coordination and get back to you with a unified recommendation. After hanging up, I immediately called Tyler's direct line. When he answered, his voice carried none of the deference that had characterized our early relationship. Tyler, we need to talk about consolidated manufacturing. You presented a proposal that conflicts with our established strategy. Actually, Alita, I presented an alternative strategy that Richard specifically asked me to develop. He felt our current approach might benefit from fresh thinking. Richard asked you directly. That's right. Has been encouraging me to think independently about client solutions. Maybe he didn't mention it because he didn't want you to feel like he was going around you. The implication was clear. Richard was losing confidence in my leadership and turning to Tyler for innovation. Whether or not this was true, Tyler was gambling that I wouldn't risk my relationship with the CEO by demanding verification. I decided to call his bluff. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Richard to discuss client coordination and strategic alignment. His secretary scheduled me for the following Friday, a week away, which suggested this wasn't high priority for him. During that week, Tyler's behavior became even more brazen. He began attending executive meetings that I hadn't been invited to, claiming that Richard had requested his presence to provide younger perspectives on market trends. When I asked Jessica to verify these meetings through the executive calendar, she discovered that Tyler was indeed on the invitation list for sessions I had previously attended. This doesn't make sense, Jessica said, reviewing the calendar entries. These are senior leadership strategy meetings. Why would they invite someone who's been here less than 3 years? Because he's Richard's nephew, I replied, finally acknowledging what I should have recognized months earlier. And because he's convinced them that he represents the future while I represent the past. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Tyler wasn't just stealing my ideas or undermining my authority. He was systematically positioning himself as my replacement. Every conversation, every meeting, every strategic suggestion had been part of a calculated campaign to demonstrate his value while diminishing mine. When I finally met with Richard that Friday, my worst fears were confirmed. Alita, I appreciate you coming to me with these concerns, Richard said, leaning back in his executive chair. But, I have to say, some of what you're describing sounds like normal generational differences in approach. Sir, this isn't about generational differences. Tyler has been presenting my strategies as his own innovations and accessing confidential information without proper authorization. Richard's expression grew stern. That's a serious accusation. Do you have evidence of intellectual property theft? I realized I had walked into a trap. All of Tyler's actions existed in gray areas. Accessing files he had been given credentials to use. Sharing ideas that could be characterized as collaborative thinking. Networking that could be seen as professional development. What I have is a pattern of behavior that suggests deliberate undermining of established protocols. Or what I might see as initiative and fresh thinking. Richard's tone had turned distinctly cooler. Alita, Tyler's been bringing some excellent insights to our executive discussions. His ideas about digital integration and market modernization have been very well received. Those ideas came from strategies we developed together during his mentoring. Are you saying you want credit for his contributions? The question was a masterpiece of manipulation. By framing my concern as ego rather than ethical violation, Richard had made me sound petty and territorial. I realized that Tyler had already been laying groundwork for this conversation, probably for months. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm concerned about coordination and clear communication channels. Well, I'll talk to Tyler about keeping you more informed. But honestly, Alita, some of your concerns sound like resistance to change. Tyler represents exactly the kind of forward-thinking leadership we need to stay competitive. I left Richard's office feeling defeated and isolated. Tyler had maneuvered brilliantly, positioning himself as the innovator while making me appear threatened by progress. Worse, he had done it with the subtle backing of family connection and the explicit support of executive leadership. That afternoon, Tyler stopped by my office with a sympathetic expression that barely concealed his satisfaction. Richard mentioned you had some concerns about coordination. I want you to know that I value everything you've taught me, and I'd never want to step on your toes. I appreciate that, Tyler. I hope you know that when I bring new ideas to executive meetings, I'm building on the foundation you gave me. I always try to acknowledge that your mentorship has been instrumental in my development. It was perfectly crafted, an expression of gratitude that simultaneously reinforced his independence and positioned my concerns as oversensitivity. I realized I was looking at someone who had learned far more than marketing strategies during our time together. He had learned how to manipulate corporate dynamics with surgical precision. I'm glad the mentoring has been valuable, I managed. It has been, and I hope we can continue working together as I take on more responsibilities. I know change can be challenging, but I think we make a great team. The phrase, as I take on more responsibilities, wasn't accidental. Tyler was signaling that his role expansion was inevitable, and that my choices were adaptation or irrelevance. As he left my office, I understood that the eager graduate I had been so proud to mentor no longer existed, if he ever had. In his place stood someone who had used our professional relationship as a stepping stone to power, and who now saw me as an obstacle to be managed or removed. Year 4 brought the promotion I should have seen coming. Tyler was named Acting Assistant Director, a newly created position that placed him just one level below me in the departmental hierarchy. Richard announced it during our monthly all-hands meeting with characteristic enthusiasm. I'm pleased to announce that Tyler Thompson has been promoted to Acting Assistant Director of Marketing. His innovative approaches and fresh perspective have already contributed significantly to our strategic development. The polite applause felt hollow in my ears. I watched Tyler accept congratulations with that same confident smile, while I processed the implications. Acting Assistant Director wasn't just a promotion. It was a signal that management viewed him as leadership material. After the meeting, Sandra Williams from Human Resources approached me with what she presented as routine procedural information. Alita, with Tyler's promotion, we'll need to restructure some of the departmental reporting lines. Several of the junior analysts will now report directly to him for day-to-day operations, while major strategic decisions will still flow through you. I knew corporate restructuring well enough to recognize the beginning of the end. By giving Tyler direct reports, they were creating a power base for him while slowly isolating me from operational control. Which analysts, specifically, David Park, Jennifer Walsh, and Michael Torres, will transition to Tyler's supervision starting next Monday. You'll retain oversight of senior campaign development and client relationships. 3 of my most capable team members, including David, who had been instrumental in our most successful campaigns. The message was clear. Tyler was being positioned to inherit the department's future, while I was relegated to maintaining its past. Over the following weeks, Tyler began implementing changes with disturbing efficiency. He instituted new reporting protocols that required all strategic proposals to be reviewed by his team before reaching my desk. Ostensibly, this was to ensure comprehensive analysis and fresh perspectives. In reality, it meant Tyler now had oversight of every significant decision in the department. The first major project under the new structure was a campaign proposal for Hartwell Corporation, one of our longest-standing clients. I had been developing a relationship-based approach that built on 15 years of successful partnership. When Tyler's team reviewed my proposal, they returned it with extensive suggestions for modernization. Alita, your relationship focus is solid, Tyler explained during our review meeting. But Hartwell's decision-makers are changing. The new purchasing director is 20 years younger than her predecessor. We need digital engagement, social media integration, real-time analytics. Your traditional approach might not resonate. He wasn't wrong about Hartwell's personnel changes, but his critique implied that I was incapable of adapting to new circumstances. When I pointed out that I had been incorporating digital strategies into my campaigns for years, Tyler nodded diplomatically. Absolutely. But our analytics team thinks we can take it further. More aggressive targeting, influencer partnerships, that sort of thing. Why don't you let David and Jennifer develop some supplementary proposals? Fresh eyes might catch opportunities we're missing. Once again, he had maneuvered me into a position where resistance looked like stubbornness. I agreed to the collaboration, not realizing I was handing him the tools for my professional destruction. 2 weeks later, Tyler presented the Hartwell proposal to Richard and the executive team. I wasn't invited to the presentation, but Jessica provided me with a detailed briefing afterward. He presented your relationship strategy as the foundational approach, she reported, but spent most of the time on the digital enhancements his team developed. Made it sound like you needed their help to modernize your thinking. What was Richard's response? He loved it. Called it exactly the kind of strategic evolution Thompson Industries needed. Tyler got a lot of praise for bridging traditional methods with innovative techniques. I felt sick. Tyler had taken my core strategy, enhanced it with basic digital marketing tactics, and presented the combination as his own innovation while positioning me as the outdated partner who required his guidance. But that was just the beginning. Over the next several months, Tyler systematically implemented a campaign of professional sabotage disguised as collaborative improvement. Every proposal I developed was subjected to his team's enhancement process. Every client meeting included his representatives to provide additional perspective. Every strategic decision required his input for comprehensive analysis. The effect was devastating. Clients began asking for Tyler specifically, viewing him as the dynamic leader driving innovation, while I became the traditional support providing historical context. Internal executives started directing strategic questions to him rather than me, seeing him as the department's future while treating me as its institutional memory. My stress levels reached dangerous heights. I was working 12-hour days trying to maintain control of my own department, while Tyler operated with the casual confidence of someone who knew the outcome was inevitable. Sleep became elusive. My relationship with David, my fiancé of 2 years, began suffering under the strain. You're obsessed with this Tyler situation, David said during one of our increasingly frequent arguments. Maybe you should consider that he's just good at his job. Has good at stealing credit and manipulating people. Or maybe you're having trouble accepting that someone younger might have better ideas. The fact that even David was beginning to doubt my perspective showed how effectively Tyler had been managing the narrative. I was becoming isolated professionally and personally, while he grew stronger and more confident. During this time, Jessica became my only reliable ally. She had observed Tyler's methods firsthand and recognized the systematic nature of his campaign. Has not just ambitious, she told me during one of our private conversations. Has calculating. Everything he does has multiple purposes. When he restructures reporting lines, he's both building his team and isolating you. When he enhances your proposals, has both improving the work and claiming credit. It's like his playing chess, while everyone else is playing checkers. With Jessica's help, I began documenting Tyler's behavior more systematically. We tracked instances where he claimed credit for collaborative work, recorded meetings where he subtly undermined my authority, and collected evidence of his growing influence over department operations. But documentation felt futile when everyone around us was celebrating Tyler's success. Richard regularly praised his contributions during executive meetings. Other department heads sought his input on cross-functional projects. Even the junior employees seemed more energized by his leadership than mine. The breaking point came during our annual performance review cycle. I expected constructive feedback about coordination and strategic development. Instead, I received the most devastating professional evaluation of my career. Alita, your technical skills remain strong, Richard began. But there are concerns about your adaptability and collaborative approach. Concerns from whom? Multiple sources have noted some resistance to new methodologies and territorial behavior regarding strategic development. There's a perception that you're having difficulty sharing leadership responsibilities. I realized that Tyler had been systematically building a case against me through carefully orchestrated feedback from colleagues he had influenced. Every instance where I had questioned his methods, every time I had insisted on proper protocols, every moment of professional disagreement had been reframed as evidence of my inadequacy. What specific changes are you recommending? We're going to be restructuring the department to better utilize Tyler's strategic capabilities. You'll retain senior oversight, but Tyler will assume primary responsibility for campaign development and client relations. Primary responsibility. The words hit me like a physical blow. After 15 years with the company and 5 years of successful mentorship, I was being demoted to make room for the person I had trained. Richard, I need you to understand what's really happening here. What I understand is that Tyler has brought energy and innovation to the department, while you've seemed increasingly resistant to change. I'm hoping this restructuring will help you rediscover your collaborative spirit. That night, I sat in my apartment with a bottle of wine and a growing sense of desperation. Tyler had outmaneuvered me completely. Through a combination of family connections, strategic manipulation, and genuine charisma, he had convinced everyone that my decline was evidence of his ascent. But as I reviewed the documentation Jessica and I had compiled, a different pattern began to emerge. Tyler's success wasn't just built on manipulation and theft. There were inconsistencies in his background that nobody had bothered to verify. His Northwestern MBA, his previous internship experience, even his academic credentials deserved closer scrutiny. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. Tyler might be skilled at corporate politics, but if his foundation was built on lies, then his entire house of cards might be more vulnerable than anyone realized. The investigation began quietly, during lunch hours and weekend visits to the office when Tyler wasn't around. Jessica proved invaluable, using her administrative access to gather information that would have been difficult for me to obtain directly. I started with basic employment verification, she explained during one of our covert meetings in the parking garage. Tyler's resume lists a summer internship at Morrison Strategic Consulting in Chicago, but when I called their HR department, they have no record of him ever working there. My pulse quickened. Are you sure? I spoke to 3 different people. They checked systems going back 10 years. Tyler Thompson never worked at Morrison Strategic. Not as an intern. Not in any capacity. This was the first concrete evidence of deception, but Jessica's discoveries were just beginning. I also contacted Northwestern's registrar office. It took some persistence, but I was able to verify his graduation. He did receive an MBA, but not with the honors he claims. No dean's list, no top 10%. His GPA was barely above the minimum for graduation. Each revelation felt like vindication, but I knew that resume embellishment wouldn't be enough to challenge someone with Richard's protection. I needed something more substantial, more immediately threatening to the company. The breakthrough came when I decided to examine Tyler's expense reports more carefully. As acting assistant director, he had been granted significant discretionary spending authority for client entertainment and strategic development initiatives. What I found was a pattern of expenditures that made no business sense. Tyler had been billing the company for expensive dinners at high-end restaurants, but when I cross-referenced the dates with our client database, These meals weren't with Thompson Industries clients. He was using company funds to entertain people from outside our business network entirely. Even more suspicious were his strategic consulting expenses. Over the past year, Tyler had authorized payments totaling nearly $75,000 to something called Pinnacle Analytics Solutions for market research and competitive intelligence services. Have you ever heard of Pinnacle Analytics? I asked Jessica. Never. And I process most of the vendor payments for external consultants. A quick internet search revealed that Pinnacle Analytics Solutions was a recently registered LLC with a Chicago address. The company had no website, no listed employees, and no visible business operations beyond a basic corporate filing. With Jessica's help, I spent the following weekend conducting a deeper investigation into Tyler's financial activities. What we discovered was systematic embezzlement disguised as legitimate business expenses. Pinnacle Analytics Solutions was owned by Tyler Thompson. He had created a fake consulting company, authorized payments to himself for non-existent services, and been stealing company funds for almost 18 months. The total amount exceeded $100,000. But the embezzlement was only part of the story. As we dug deeper into Tyler's background, we uncovered a pattern of deception that stretched back years. His Northwestern MBA thesis, which he had occasionally referenced in strategic discussions, was almost entirely plagiarized from a combination of published business journals and other students' work. Using academic database searches, Jessica identified dozens of passages that had been copied verbatim without attribution. Even more damaging, we discovered that Tyler had been dismissed from 2 previous positions for ethical violations. His resume showed steady career progression, but the reality was a series of short-term employments that ended when employers discovered problems with his conduct. He worked at Brennan Industries for 8 months, Jessica reported. I spoke to someone in their HR department who remembered him. He was terminated for submitting false client reports and claiming credit for other employees' work. What about his position before that? Similar story. 6 months at Continental Marketing Group before they discovered he had been sharing confidential client information with competitors. The pattern was clear. Tyler was a serial corporate fraud who had perfected the art of infiltrating companies, stealing what he could, and moving on before the consequences caught up with him. Thompson Industries was just his most successful target because his family connection provided protection and credibility. But the most shocking discovery came when Jessica found evidence that Tyler was currently negotiating with Hartwell Corporation's biggest competitor. Through careful examination of his email activity and phone records, we discovered that he had been having secret conversations with executives at Continental Manufacturing about bringing Thompson Industries' strategic plans and client information to their organization. Tyler wasn't just planning to advance within Thompson Industries. He was planning to defect to our primary competitor, taking our trade secrets and client relationships with him. His pursuit of the vice president position was intended to give him access to even more valuable corporate intelligence before making his move. This is corporate espionage, I breathed, staring at the evidence spread across Jessica's kitchen table. It's also our way out, Jessica replied. This isn't about personality conflicts or generational differences anymore. This is about protecting the company from someone who's actively betraying it. That Sunday evening, I sat in my apartment organizing everything we had discovered into a comprehensive dossier. Financial documents proving embezzlement, academic records showing plagiarism and false credentials, employment history revealing a pattern of fraud, communication logs demonstrating current espionage activities. For the first time in months, I felt calm. Tyler had been playing a sophisticated game, but he had made one critical error. He had assumed that his family connection made him untouchable. He never considered that someone might investigate his background systematically enough to uncover the full scope of his deception. Monday morning brought news that confirmed our worst suspicions and provided the final piece of our puzzle. Sandra from HR called to inform me that Tyler had requested immediate access to additional classified databases as part of his preparation for potential vice president responsibilities. He specifically asked for full access to our strategic planning systems and competitive analysis archives, Sandra explained. Richard approved the request as part of Tyler's executive development track. I realized that Tyler was accelerating his timeline. The vice president promotion was imminent, and he was positioning himself to gather maximum intelligence before making his move to continental manufacturing. But I also realized that this created an opportunity. If Tyler was about to gain access to our most sensitive corporate information, then revealing his betrayal became a matter of immediate corporate security rather than personal grievance. That afternoon, I made copies of our complete dossier and prepared for what I knew would be the most important conversation of my professional life. Tyler might have spent months maneuvering himself into an unassailable position, but he had underestimated both my persistence and Jessica's investigative skills. More importantly, he had made the classic mistake of believing his own performance. Tyler had been so successful at manipulating people's perceptions that he had begun to think he was truly untouchable. Tomorrow was Tuesday. Richard had scheduled the official announcement of Tyler's vice president promotion for Wednesday morning, followed by a celebration lunch with the executive team. Tyler would spend Tuesday finalizing his access to classified systems and preparing for his new role. But first, he would have to survive our Tuesday afternoon meeting, where I would present him with an offer he couldn't refuse: immediate resignation or complete exposure of his criminal activities. I had learned a great deal during 5 years of mentoring Tyler Thompson, but the most valuable lesson had nothing to do with marketing strategy or corporate leadership. I had learned that sometimes the greatest act of teaching is showing someone that actions have consequences. Tyler was about to discover that even perfect manipulation has its limits when confronted with irrefutable evidence and a person who refuses to be intimidated. Tuesday arrived with unusual clarity, like the morning after a storm when everything feels sharp and clean. I arrived at the office early, reviewing my documentation one final time and mentally rehearsing the confrontation that would determine both our futures. Tyler seemed unusually energetic, practically bouncing into the office with the enthusiasm of someone anticipating a major victory. He spent the morning in meetings with IT, finalizing his access to the executive database systems. During lunch, I watched him from my office window as he made animated phone calls from his car in the parking lot. At 2 o'clock, Richard's secretary confirmed that Tyler's promotion ceremony was scheduled for the following morning at 10. The email invitation had already gone out to senior leadership, with a celebration lunch to follow at the Metropolitan Club. Tyler Thompson was less than 20 hours away from achieving everything he had been working toward for 5 years. But first, Richard had scheduled what Tyler believed would be a routine administrative meeting at 4:30. Tyler thought this was a final briefing before his promotion announcement. Instead, it would be the moment when his carefully constructed world collapsed. I spent the afternoon in an oddly peaceful state. Jessica brought me updates on Tyler's activities, more database access requests, additional phone calls from his car, what appeared to be last-minute preparations for his transition to executive leadership. Everything was proceeding exactly as Tyler expected. At 4:15, I knocked on Richard's office door, carrying a single manila folder that contained 5 years of evidence. Richard was reviewing Tyler's official promotion paperwork, the documents that would make Tyler one of the youngest vice presidents in Thompson Industries history. Alita, good to see you. Tyler should be here shortly. I wanted to brief you on the transition timeline for his new responsibilities. Actually, Richard, before Tyler arrives, there's something critical you need to see. I placed the folder on his desk. This contains evidence that Tyler has been systematically defrauding the company and is currently planning to defect to Continental Manufacturing with our trade secrets. Richard's expression shifted from confusion to irritation. Alita, we've discussed your concerns about Tyler before. Tomorrow is his promotion day. This isn't the time for personality conflicts. This isn't about personality. This is about corporate espionage and embezzlement. Please look at the evidence before Tyler arrives. Something in my tone must have convinced him, because Richard opened the folder and began examining the documents inside. I watched his face change as he processed what he was seeing: financial records, communication logs, employment verification failures, academic fraud documentation. What exactly am I looking at here? Tyler has been stealing from the company through fake consulting contracts, has plagiarized his academic credentials, has been fired from 2 previous positions for similar fraud, and he's currently negotiating with Continental Manufacturing to sell them our strategic plans and client information. Richard's face had gone pale. These are serious accusations, Alita. They're not accusations. They're documented facts. Tyler created a fake consulting company called Pinnacle Analytics and has been paying himself over $100,000 in company funds. His MBA thesis is almost entirely plagiarized. His employment history is fabricated. And he's planning to defect to our biggest competitor as soon as he gains access to our classified systems. Before Richard could respond, Tyler knocked on the door and entered with his characteristic confident smile. "Good afternoon, Richard." "Alita." His tone was warm and professional, showing no awareness that anything had changed. "I'm excited to discuss tomorrow's transition plans." Richard's voice was carefully controlled. "Tyler, please sit down. Alita has brought some concerns to my attention that we need to address." For the first time, Tyler's expression showed uncertainty. He glanced between Richard and me, clearly trying to assess the situation. "Concerns? I'm not sure what you mean." Richard lifted several documents from the folder. "Can you explain why Thomson Industries has been paying a company called Pinnacle Analytics Solutions for consulting services that apparently don't exist?" Tyler's confident facade cracked slightly. "I'm not familiar with that specific vendor. Our department works with dozens of consultants. Maybe Alita can provide more context." "Pinnacle Analytics is registered to Tyler Thompson," I said quietly. "You created a fake company and have been embezzling funds through fraudulent consulting contracts." The silence in the room was deafening. Tyler's face cycled through several expressions: surprise, confusion, calculation, before settling on indignant denial. "That's absurd. Richard, I think Alita is having some kind of breakdown. These accusations are completely unfounded." Richard held up additional documents. "These are bank records showing payments from Thomson Industries to an account registered in your name. This is a copy of your Northwestern transcript showing that your academic honors were fabricated, and these are communication logs indicating ongoing conversations with Continental Manufacturing executives." As each piece of evidence was presented, Tyler's composure deteriorated further, but his response wasn't remorse or confession. It was escalating aggression. "This is obviously some kind of setup. Alita has been threatened by my success from the beginning. She's clearly fabricated evidence to sabotage my promotion." "Tyler," Richard said slowly, "these documents include bank statements, academic transcripts, and employment verification records. Alita couldn't have fabricated this level of documentation. Then someone else is behind this. Maybe Continental Manufacturing is trying to damage Thomson Industries by framing me." "Richard, you know me. You know my character. I would never betray the company or your trust." It was a masterful performance, the wounded nephew appealing to family loyalty and personal relationship. For a moment, I wondered if Tyler might actually convince Richard to dismiss the evidence through sheer force of personality and family connection. But then Richard opened the final section of the folder, containing the communication logs that proved Tyler's current espionage activities. "Tyler, can you explain why you've been having weekly phone conversations with Daniel Patterson at Continental Manufacturing, and why those conversations have intensified since you gained access to our strategic planning systems?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Tyler's face went completely white as he realized that his most secret activities had been discovered and documented. "Richard, I can explain everything. Please do." For the first time since I had known him, Tyler was at a complete loss for words. His gift for smooth explanations and diplomatic maneuvering had finally encountered a situation that couldn't be talked away. The Continental conversations. Those were just informal industry networking. Nothing inappropriate. Informal networking that began the same week you requested expanded database access and intensified as your promotion approached. Tyler's desperate gaze shifted between Richard and me, searching for some angle of attack or avenue of escape. Finding none, he made one final attempt to control the narrative. "Even if some of these allegations were true, and am not admitting anything, you have to consider what I've brought to this company. My innovations, my strategic insights, my relationship with clients. Thomson Industries is stronger because of my contributions." Richard's response was quiet and final. "Your contributions were largely built on stolen ideas and fraudulent credentials. Your client relationships were developed using confidential information you weren't authorized to access. And your strategic insights were enhanced by industrial espionage." The room fell silent again. Tyler sat motionless, his entire world collapsing around him in real time. "Tyler, You're terminated immediately. Security will escort you from the building. The legal department will be pursuing both civil and criminal charges for embezzlement and corporate espionage. Tyler's final mask, the wounded family member, finally slipped completely. What remained was cold calculation and barely controlled fury. You have no idea what you're doing, Richard. Continental was offering me twice what you pay, plus equity participation. I could have been an asset to this transition instead of an enemy. The admission was complete. Tyler wasn't just acknowledging his betrayal. He was threatening retaliation for being discovered. And Alita, Tyler turned to me with unconcealed hatred. You think you've won something here, but you've just destroyed the most talented person in this department. Enjoy managing Thompson Industries' decline into irrelevance. It was a perfect final performance, entitled, threatening, and completely devoid of remorse or responsibility. Tyler Thompson was showing us exactly who he had always been underneath the diplomatic facade. Security arrived within minutes to escort Tyler from the building. As he gathered his personal items under supervision, I felt no satisfaction or triumph, only profound sadness for the genuine potential that had been corrupted by greed and ambition. But as Tyler disappeared into the elevator for the final time, I also felt something else. Relief. The nightmare was finally over, and Thompson Industries was safe from the person who had been systematically betraying it from within. The investigation that followed Tyler's termination uncovered an even more extensive pattern of fraud than Jessica and I had initially discovered. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit found evidence of systematic embezzlement totaling nearly $200,000, spread across multiple fake vendor accounts and consulting contracts. Tyler's academic fraud was reported to Northwestern University, which launched its own investigation and ultimately revoked his MBA degree upon confirming widespread plagiarism in his thesis and coursework. The revelation made local business news, with headlines about corporate nepotism and the importance of thorough background checks. But the most satisfying discovery came when investigators examined Tyler's communications with Continental Manufacturing. Rather than being the master manipulator he had presented himself as, Tyler was actually being played by Continental's executives, who had no intention of hiring him. They were simply using him to gather intelligence about Thompson Industries' strategic plans, with Tyler too blinded by ego to realize he was being used. Continental Manufacturing faced federal charges for industrial espionage, while Tyler was convicted of embezzlement and sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. The judge cited his sophisticated and premeditated fraud scheme as grounds for the substantial sentence. Richard Thompson handled the immediate aftermath with characteristic decisiveness. He called an emergency board meeting to brief leadership on the situation, taking full responsibility for the security breach and implementing new background verification protocols for all senior hires. This was a failure of oversight on my part, he announced during a company-wide meeting. Personal relationships and family connections cannot override our responsibility to protect this company's integrity. To my surprise, Richard offered me Tyler's intended position as Vice President of Strategic Development. But after 5 years of manipulation and stress, I realized that what I really wanted was the opportunity to rebuild the department according to my own vision. I appreciate the offer, Richard, but I'd like to propose something different. Make me Chief Innovation Officer, and let me develop a new framework for integrating traditional relationship-based strategies with genuine technological advancement. Richard agreed immediately, recognizing that my combination of experience and vindication made me the ideal person to restore confidence in the department's leadership. Jessica was promoted to Assistant Director, bringing her investigative skills and loyalty to a role where she could help prevent future security breaches. Together, we implemented new protocols for vendor verification, expense monitoring, and employee background checks that became a model for other companies in our industry. 6 months after Tyler's conviction, Thompson Industries was thriving. Our client relationships had strengthened as word spread about our commitment to integrity and transparency. Employee morale reached record highs as people realized they were working for a company that took ethics seriously. The most unexpected development came when several other companies contacted us about employees who had worked with Tyler at previous positions. Our investigation had helped identify a network of corporate fraud that had been operating across multiple industries for years. David and I rebuilt our relationship stronger than before. He admitted that Tyler's manipulation had been so sophisticated that even he had begun to doubt my perspective. "I should have trusted your instincts," he said during one of our long conversations about the experience. "You knew something was wrong long before anyone else." 1 year later, I received a letter from Tyler in federal prison. His tone was completely different from the entitled fury he had displayed during his termination. Prison had apparently provided him with perspective that freedom and success had not. "Alita," the letter read, "I've had a lot of time to think about the choices I made and the damage I caused. You tried to teach me about integrity and building genuine relationships, but I was too focused on shortcuts and manipulation to listen. I want you to know that I understand now how much I threw away and how many people I hurt. I hope someday I can find a way to make amends for the trust I betrayed." I showed the letter to Jessica, who read it with the same skepticism she had always applied to Tyler's communications. "Do you think he means it?" she asked. "I think prison has a way of forcing people to confront reality," I replied. "Whether Tyler can actually change remains to be seen, but at least he's acknowledging what he did instead of blaming everyone else." 2 years after the scandal, I was invited to speak at Northwestern University's business school about corporate ethics and mentorship responsibilities. Standing in front of 200 MBA students, I thought about Tyler and the lessons his story contained for the next generation of business leaders. "The greatest temptation in corporate life isn't financial corruption," I told them. "It's the belief that talent and ambition justify any means necessary to achieve success. But true leadership is built on integrity, transparency, and genuine service to others. The moment you start manipulating people instead of inspiring them, you've already lost the game that matters." After my presentation, a young woman approached me with a question that brought everything full circle. "Miss Rodriguez, what advice would you give to someone who wants to be a mentor but is worried about being taken advantage of?" I thought carefully before responding. Don't let one bad experience prevent you from helping others grow. The vast majority of people are genuinely grateful for guidance and support. Tyler was an exception, not the rule. But also trust your instincts. If someone's behavior doesn't match their words consistently over time, pay attention to that disconnect. And always remember that the goal of mentorship isn't creating a copy of yourself. It's helping someone become the best version of themselves. Today, Thompson Industries continues to thrive under ethical leadership that values both innovation and integrity. I've successfully mentored 6 other junior executives, all of whom have advanced in their careers while maintaining the principles we discussed during their development. The experience taught me that sometimes the greatest act of teaching is showing someone that actions have consequences. Tyler needed to learn that manipulation and fraud lead to isolation and prison, not success and admiration. But I also learned that real mentorship requires wisdom about human nature, not just professional expertise. True innovation comes from building on strong foundations, not tearing them down. Progress happens when talented people work together with mutual respect and shared values, not when individuals pursue personal advancement at everyone else's expense. Most importantly, I discovered that standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult and risky, ultimately creates more opportunities than it destroys. The reputation I built by exposing corporate fraud has opened doors and created relationships that would never have existed if I had remained silent. Jessica often reminds me that Tyler's story could have ended very differently if we hadn't decided to investigate his background systematically. He might have successfully stolen company secrets, defected to Continental Manufacturing, and repeated his pattern of fraud at yet another organization. "You didn't just save your own career," she pointed out recently. "You probably saved other companies from being victimized by the same person." That perspective helps me remember that individual integrity has broader implications than we often realize. When we choose to do the right thing, we're not just protecting ourselves, we're protecting entire systems and communities from people who would exploit trust for personal gain. The folder I handed to Richard Thompson that Tuesday afternoon contained more than evidence of Tyler's crimes. It contained proof that even the most sophisticated manipulation can be defeated by persistence, careful documentation, and the courage to speak truth to power. 5 years of mentoring taught me many things about leadership, strategy, and human nature. But the most valuable lesson came from Tyler's betrayal. Sometimes the best way to move forward is to stand firmly for what's right, no matter how difficult that choice might seem in the moment. Have you ever had to choose between personal safety and doing what's right? How do you think you'd handle discovering that someone you trusted was systematically betraying that trust? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help others find it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up for integrity in challenging situations. Sharing stories like this helps create awareness about corporate fraud and the importance of ethical leadership. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Remember that your integrity is your most valuable asset, and protecting it is always worth the effort, even when the cost seems high. Stay strong, stay ethical, and never underestimate the power of doing the right thing.